If you looked out my living room window every night, you would see the same house across the street. A small, white house, a perfectly trimmed lawn, a quiet, suburban neighborhood in Ohio. Nothing about it looked unusual, except for one thing. The light in the upstairs bedroom was always on, every night, every morning, even during the middle of the afternoon. It never went dark. My name is Ethan Miller, and when I first moved into the neighborhood, I assumed someone lived there. Maybe an old man, maybe someone who worked nights. I never thought much about it, until I started noticing something strange. The lawn was always freshly cut. The bushes were always perfectly trimmed. The driveway was always clean, but I never saw anyone do it. No lawnmower, no gardener, no cars coming or going, no deliveries, nothing. And yet somehow, the house always looked like someone was taking care of it. One evening around 11:40 p.m., I was sitting on my couch watching television. Rain was falling outside. The whole neighborhood was dark, except for that house. That same yellow light was glowing upstairs. I looked at it for a few seconds, and then I saw someone standing behind the window. A tall figure, completely still. I froze. At first, I thought it was a coat hanging behind the curtains, so I stood up and moved closer to my window. The figure didn't move. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in. The moment my camera focused, the figure disappeared. I stared at the empty window. Nothing, just curtains. I laughed nervously and told myself I was imagining things. The next morning, everything looked normal. The grass was freshly cut, the curtains were closed, and that same upstairs light was on. A few days later, I mentioned the house to my neighbor, an older man named Robert. His expression changed immediately. I asked him, "Do you know who lives there?" Robert looked toward the house, then he lowered his voice. "Nobody." I laughed. "What do you mean, nobody?" He said, "The owner died 8 years ago." I looked back at the house. "But the lights..." Robert interrupted me. "That's the strange part." I asked him who paid the electricity bill. He didn't answer. Instead, he simply said, "Don't go near that house after midnight." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. That night, I decided to stay awake until 2 a.m. I placed my phone on the windowsill and started recording the house. 1:30, 1:45, 1:59. Then, exactly at 2 a.m., the upstairs light went out. For the first time since I had moved into the neighborhood, the house was completely dark. I stared at it. 3 seconds passed. Then the light came back on. But this time, it wasn't upstairs. It was in a room on the first floor. A room I had never seen lit before. I leaned closer to the window, and then someone appeared behind the glass. A hand slowly pressed against the window. Long fingers, pale skin. The hand stayed there for several seconds, then it slowly dragged downward. I stepped away from my window. My phone suddenly vibrated. Motion detected. I opened the notification. The security camera wasn't showing the house across the street. It was showing my living room. My blood went cold. I slowly turned around. There was nobody there. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. The windows were closed. I looked at the television. It was turned off. But the black screen reflected my living room. And in that reflection, someone was standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the television. The figure was still there. Tall, thin, motionless. Then it slowly turned its head toward me. Its lips moved. No sound came from the television, but I could clearly read the words. That house isn't empty. Every light in my house suddenly went out. At the exact same moment, the light across the street turned on. And this time, there were two figures standing in the window. One was standing close to the glass. The other was directly behind it. Both were looking at me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went straight to Robert's house. I asked him, what was the owner's name? He stared at me for several seconds. Then he said, Michael Harris. I asked, how did he die? Robert looked uncomfortable. Finally, he said, he jumped from the upstairs window. I felt a chill run through me. I asked, why? Robert looked toward Michael's house. Then he said something I'll never forget. Michael believed someone was watching him. I asked, who? Robert shook his head. He said he could see someone standing in the window of the house across from him. I looked at the house. Then I realized something. The house Michael was supposedly looking at didn't exist when Michael was alive. The property had been empty land back then. The house had been built almost a year after his death. So what had Michael seen?
That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. At exactly 1:47 a.m., I looked outside again. The upstairs light was on, but this time, there was writing on the window. 3 words, written from the inside. I couldn't read them clearly, so I grabbed my jacket, and for the first time, I crossed the street. I walked toward the house. The front door was slightly open. I pushed it. It slowly creaked inward. Inside, the house was completely empty. No furniture, no pictures, no signs that anyone had lived there. But upstairs, that light was still on. I climbed the stairs, one step at a time. At the top was a small bedroom. There was only one thing inside, a wooden chair facing the window. I walked toward it, and then I noticed something on the wall. Photographs, dozens of them. All photographs of my house, my living room, my window, my driveway. And then, one photograph made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me, sitting on my couch, taken from outside my window. The date on the photograph was yesterday. I stepped backward. Then I noticed another photograph. It was much older. It showed Michael Harris sitting in the exact same chair, looking through the same window. Underneath the photograph was a handwritten note. It said, "When it starts watching you, don't look back." I heard a noise behind me, a soft whisper. "Don't look at the window." I froze. The voice came again, this time right beside my ear. "Whatever you do, don't look." I slowly turned my head. There was nobody there, but when I looked toward the window, I saw my own house across the street, and in my bedroom window, someone was standing there. Someone who looked exactly like me. Then my phone suddenly turned on by itself. The screen showed a live camera feed. My house, my bedroom. And the person standing in my window slowly turned toward the camera. Then it smiled and whispered, "Now it's your turn." The phone fell from my hand, and behind me, the bedroom door slowly closed.
The bedroom door closed behind me. I stood completely still. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Then I heard footsteps, slow footsteps, coming from the hallway. 1, 2, 3. They stopped directly outside the bedroom. I looked at the door. The handle slowly turned. But before the door opened, the footsteps disappeared. Silence. I grabbed my phone and ran. I rushed down the stairs. The front door was still open. I ran outside and didn't stop until I reached my house. I locked every door, closed every curtain, and stayed awake until sunrise. When morning finally came, I looked across the street. The house looked completely normal. The lawn was freshly cut, the windows were clean, and the upstairs light was on. I spent the entire morning researching Michael Harris. I found an old newspaper article from 8 years earlier. The headline said, "Local man dies in apparent suicide." But there was one sentence that caught my attention. It said Michael had repeatedly told neighbors that someone was watching him from the window of a house across the street. But according to the property records, there had been no house across the street at that time, only an empty lot. I searched through old property documents, and then I found something disturbing. The house across from Michael's property had been built 11 months after his death. So Michael hadn't been seeing a person inside that house, because the house didn't exist. I went back to Robert. I showed him the photographs. He immediately told me to leave. I asked him why. He said, because Michael wasn't the first. I stared at him. What do you mean? Robert told me that 3 previous owners had lived in my house, and every one of them had complained about the same thing: the light across the street, the figure in the window, and strange photographs appearing inside their homes. I asked him what happened to them. Robert looked at the floor. One moved away, another disappeared, and Michael, he didn't finish the sentence. I asked, what happened to the third person? Robert looked directly at me. She was found sitting in front of that window. Dead? He nodded. Her eyes were open. I asked what she had been looking at. Robert whispered, "The house." That night, I decided I wasn't going to stay. I packed a bag. I was going to leave before midnight, but at 11:58 p.m., I noticed something. The light across the street had turned off. For the first time, the house was completely dark. I thought maybe it was finally over. Then I heard a noise from upstairs, a soft knocking. 3 knocks. I walked upstairs. My bedroom window was slightly open. I hadn't opened it. I looked outside. The house across the street was still dark. Then I heard another knock. This time, it came from the window. I slowly turned around. There was nobody outside, but on the glass, a handprint was appearing from the inside. A pale handprint. Then another, and another, until there were dozens of them. I stepped backward. Suddenly, the lights across the street turned on. The upstairs window was glowing yellow again, and someone was standing inside. It was Michael. I knew it immediately. His face was pale. His eyes were completely black. He raised one finger to his lips. Then he pointed behind me. I turned around and saw something standing in the corner of my bedroom. A tall figure. The same figure I'd seen in the television reflection. The same figure from the window. It slowly stepped forward, and as it entered the light, I realized something. It wasn't a person. It looked like a human being, but there was no face, only smooth, pale skin. It stopped a few feet away from me. Then it whispered, "You looked." I couldn't move. The figure raised its hand, and suddenly, every photograph in my house fell from the walls. Dozens of photographs, hundreds. Pictures of me, pictures of my house, pictures of Michael, pictures of people I had never seen before, all of them standing in front of the same window. I finally understood. The house wasn't haunted. The house was a trap.
The light wasn't there to guide someone home. It was there to make people look. Because once you saw what was inside, it could see you too. I ran downstairs. I opened the front door, and I ran across the street, straight toward the house. I don't know why. Maybe I thought Michael could help me. Maybe I thought destroying the light would end everything. I opened the front door. The house was completely dark. I walked upstairs. The bedroom was empty, except for the chair. I walked toward it, and sitting on the chair was a photograph. It showed me standing in that exact room, but the photograph had been taken from behind me. I turned around. Nobody. Then I looked back at the photograph. There was something else in it. Someone standing directly behind me. I slowly looked at the empty space behind me. Nothing. Then the photograph changed. The person in the picture was now closer. I looked again. Closer. Again. Closer. Until the face filled the entire photograph. And then I heard a whisper behind me. "Don't turn around." I froze, because this time I recognized the voice. It was my own voice. I looked at the window instead. Outside, my house was completely dark, but there was someone standing in my bedroom window. Me. The other me raised its hand and waved. Then the upstairs light inside the house suddenly went out. Everything became black. I heard footsteps behind me, slowly approaching. I closed my eyes and remembered Michael's warning. When it starts watching you, don't look back. I stayed completely still. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard a whisper directly beside my ear. "You should have listened." The next thing I remember, I woke up in my own bed. It was morning. The house across the street looked normal. I checked every room. Nothing. No photographs, no strange figure, no footprints. Nothing. I thought maybe the entire thing had been a nightmare, until I looked at my phone. There was one new photograph, taken at 2:03 a.m. It showed me sleeping in my bed. The photograph had been taken from inside my bedroom, and underneath it was a message. "You can move anywhere you want." I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "I'll always know where you live." I immediately left the house. I moved to another state. I never went back. But about 6 months later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. I opened it, and my blood went cold. It was a picture of my new house, taken from across the street. There was one light on upstairs, and beneath the photograph, 3 words were written. "Still watching you." I never looked out that window again. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still see a warm yellow light reflected on my curtains. And I know exactly what it means. Because that light isn't coming from outside anymore. It's coming from inside my house. And if you're watching this story late at night, maybe you should check your own window. Because the scariest thing about that house wasn't the fact that someone was watching from inside. It was the fact that, once you looked back, you became part of the house. Forever.